There was a time when Annie Shephard seemed destined for a life lived in full view of the public eye. With a familiar surname, a warm presence, and an ease that cameras tend to love, many assumed her path was already mapped out. Appearances, headlines, expectations, everything pointed toward a future shaped by visibility. And yet, quietly and deliberately, Annie chose another way. This is not a story of scandal or sudden retreat. It's a story of intention. For years, Annie stood close to the glow of the spotlight. She understood its rhythm, the early mornings, the polished smiles, the unspoken pressure to always be on. To outsiders, it looked glamorous. To those who have lived long enough to know better, it also looked exhausting. Annie watched carefully, absorbing not just the success, but the cost that often accompanies it. What many people didn't see was how deeply Annie valued stillness. She had a thoughtful nature, one drawn to meaning rather than noise. While attention followed her easily, fulfillment did not. Friends describe her as reflective, someone who listens more than she speaks, someone who notices the spaces between moments. In an industry that rewards constant presence, that kind of temperament can feel out of step. As the years passed, Annie faced a crossroads familiar to many in their own lives, though perhaps on a quieter stage. Do you follow the path others expect of you, or do you honor the voice that speaks when no one else is listening? For Annie, the answer became clear not in a dramatic declaration, but in a series of small, honest realizations. She began to understand that stepping away was not the same as giving up. It was instead a way of choosing herself. There were practical reasons, of course. Life beyond the limelight offered privacy, freedom, and the ability to define success on her own terms. But there was something deeper at play. Annie wanted a life measured not by recognition, but by connection, by work that mattered to her, by days that felt whole, even if no one was watching. For an audience that has lived through decades of change, this decision may feel especially resonant. Many in their 60s know what it means to reassess, to look back at youthful ambitions and forward toward what truly brings peace. Annie's choice reflects that wisdom, even at a younger age. She recognized early what others discover later, that fulfillment is not always found where the lights are brightest. Importantly, Annie never turned her back on her family or their legacy. She carries it with quiet respect. Stepping away was not rejection, it was refinement. She chose to support from the sidelines, to live authentically rather than perform authenticity for others. Today, Annie Shephard lives a life largely unseen, and that is precisely the point. In a world that urges us to share everything, her restraint feels almost radical. And perhaps that's why her story matters. It reminds us that dignity can be private, that purpose does not require applause, and that sometimes the bravest decision is to step back when everyone expects you to step forward. In the end, Annie's untold story isn't about leaving the limelight. It's about discovering that the most meaningful light is the one that guides you home, quietly, steadily, and on your own terms.